The autonomous future, well, it's coming, but when? Who knows? But it's going to have big impact on the way we live. Lauren, you've been thinking about that impact. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your work, and that'll lead to some questions.
Sure. All right, so I work for WSP Parsons Brinckerhoff, and I've spent the last year and a half studying how governments, specifically local, regional, and state governments, can plan for driverless cars. Because what I find is that the news and the media, it's really focused on the technology and advancing the technology and which companies are involved in it, but it doesn't really focus on what the government's role should be, besides saying that the government should have a role. And meanwhile, there are huge implications for the government. So what I did was lay out in my guide what the future could look like, and I laid out a couple of scenarios, and then based on those scenarios, what does the government need to do now and also over the next 10 years to really plan for them and also proactively put the right plans and policies in place so that they're ready.
Yeah, and it's kind of that dystopian future or utopian future. What's it going to be, and what's utopian may be dystopian for one or the other, right?
Yeah, it depends who you ask. Yeah, I mean, the idea is that, in an ideal world, the way I see it, is that we're going to have a lot of shared vehicles, that autonomous technology is going to enable and make it easier for people to share vehicles and share rides so that we are reducing congestion. And we have the ability for people to get around really seamlessly, but without having to go park their car every time they get somewhere. They can just get in and out of a shared fleet. The opposite, the nightmare scenario, would be where everyone continues to own their own car and drive by themselves. And the scary part is with driverless vehicles, those cars have the ability to go even when no one else is in them. So you have the potential of really increasing the amount of vehicle miles traveled that the vehicles can do, which means you could have mass congestion. So, and people might be willing to live farther from where they work because their value of time changes if they don't need to be actively, sitting behind the wheel and focused on driving. So, that is really what those extremes could be.
And it truly becomes a mobile office. So the question is, though, for a city planner, it's really challenging because they have to worry about what's here today, not what could be. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it is really tough because the world is changing so quickly. I mean, if you look at how Uber and Lyft, the transportation network companies, how they have changed our cities in a matter of an overnight. Like they come and all of a sudden they're replacing a lot of both transit and single occupancy vehicle trips. So what can planners do? I think getting educated on autonomous vehicles, starting to talk to the technology developers to understand where they're at in the process, start to understand how there might be partnerships established, because I think both sides, public and private, have something to learn and gain from each other. And I also think starting to update travel demand models and plans to reflect driverless vehicles will be really important. I think everybody is to the point where people believe that they are definitely coming, and they're really coming in the next 3 to 5 years reasonably, and then they're only going to proliferate that much more into our cities over the next 10, 20, and 30 years. So our plans need to reflect that.
From a policy standpoint, it seems like policies need to change so the planners can think that way. Does your report make recommendations in that regard?
Yeah, so I think it's just so important that government realize how much they can influence how driverless vehicles are rolled out in our society. So if, for example, the government puts policies in place about taxing vehicle miles traveled, or having taxes or fees for parking, or incentives for not parking, or incentives for carpooling and ride sharing as opposed to owning vehicles and driving by yourself. These are the kinds of policies that will really change our behavior and really make us think about how we spend our money and how we use our vehicles.
And I would imagine it gets down to the land use as well and how the things are built and how they're designed, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, everything from parking spaces, where they are, how readily available they are, just in general urban density. Is there good transit to support getting around? Are the schools and the other kind of general city kind of needs all met within a close space, so people don't feel like they need to move outside of cities to be able to have a good quality of life. So really, there's so much that government can do to have really good, dense urban infrastructure to encourage people to use driverless vehicles to their advantages, but not leveraging any disadvantages.
Excellent, Lauren. I look forward to reading that report. So Thank you very much.
Thank you.